Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsay, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of SuperPsyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. SuperPsyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. The experiences of a military veteran are unique. They received broad, tactical training to help them excel in situations where a fraction of a second can mean life or death. And when a veteran enters civilian life, those skills can be transferred in ways that make them shine. That is certainly the case for my guest, Lieutenant Colonel Andy Riise. Andy served multiple tours of duty in combat for the U.S. Army in the Middle East. He also graduated from West Point, where he played Division I football. In short, this man has experience and spectacular skills. After 20 years of serving the U.S., he earned his master's in counseling and has done amazing things, including becoming the mental skills training coach for 2 Major League Baseball teams. And now he's doing the same in the NFL for the Chicago Bears. Simply put, there's a lot we can learn from Andy. I absolutely loved hearing about his life experiences as well as his ability to share insights that inspire the best in people, and I am confident you will too. So listen in as Andy talks about mental skills training to bring out our best when seconds count. Lieutenant Colonel Andy Riise, who has asked me to call him Andy, welcome to SuperPsyched.
Yeah, honored to be with you, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, I have loved our green room conversation. Just folks behind the scene, he's not just a scholar, an athlete, and a soldier, and an incredible healer, but just an all-around cool person. And you've got so much range. You're such an interesting, fun person to get to know. Let's just get a little bit of your backstory. I know you served for 20 years in various wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and you started after 9/11. And I see over your left shoulder the title of the book, Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. I'm guessing this has been a common thread throughout your life. But let's just hear a little bit about how you decided to do something so difficult as to serve.
Sure. It was kind of an easy decision just because I come from a family, military service members. My dad has traced my family even back to like the Revolutionary War.
Wow.
But primarily my sister was in Desert Storm, served in the Army with my brother-in-law, my late brother-in-law. My dad served during the Vietnam War. He never went overseas, but he supported some of the police efforts in the People's Parks riots, which you know in your area, and then down in the Watts riots. And so he was deployed at home on the home front, and grandfather was World War II. So both grandfathers on both sides. So this idea of serving and community service, I was an Eagle Scout growing up. My dad was very active in our community. This idea of being a part of something bigger than yourself was always a part of my family. I'm a team sport guy. And I wanted to play football at the next level. And I was a little bit of a late bloomer. So going to West Point, there's a roundabout story behind how I got there. But I managed to get there through a prep school. I barely got in from the prep school, which at the time was at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. And when I got there, I thought I was pretty tough just because I was a fullback, as I mentioned in the green room, playing football for Army. I'm the first option, triple option. But I was getting my butt kicked at him. It's this 47-month crucible that's really designed to test you and stretch you to the limit of who you are physically, mentally, socially, spiritually. And I was struggling at one point. Football was kind of my getaway, my solace from the everyday life of Ivy League academics, studying engineering, which I was not good at math. I've got the regimentation of my military training because everyone is getting ready to become a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. And then I'm playing big time college football at the same time. So football was my getaway, but then I changed positions my sophomore year to defense, and it just ripped the rug out from underneath me. And I just was really having a hard time. My coach, frankly, saw me struggling, and he referred me to this really unique student support center called the West Point Center for Enhanced Performance. And this is relevant because in 1989, this is where sport and performance psychology came in to the U.S. military, which now is the largest of sports psychology practitioners in the world. But at the time, it just was another student support center. So I started working one-on-one with an Army officer, learning about real mental toughness and about mental skills training that helped me develop confidence despite setbacks, be composed in extreme circumstances, how to concentrate amidst distractions, how to be goal-oriented and motivated and disciplined towards my goals. And I didn't really realize at the time, but I went from surviving to coping and being able to be more resilient. And then went from being resilient to be performing better in all those arenas at the academy. And I achieved my ultimate goal, which is I barely graduated, but I graduated. And 9/11 happened 100 days later. Went from a peacetime to a wartime army. I met my wife. I'm now newly married. And I'm a 25-year-old first lieutenant leading a platoon of 30 soldiers into Iraq during the Thunder Run in 2003. And we just weren't prepared for combat and for war. And we thought it was going to be kind of like Desert Storm, 100 days, go kick their ass and come home. But it didn't really work out that way. I mean, so, here I am leading a convoy of 300 vehicles across the desert, navigating and shooting, moving, communicating. And then once we got to Baghdad, there was a pause, and then the insurgency started showing up. And all of a sudden, they're not fighting us toe to toe because we had overwhelming firepower and technology, and they knew that. All these foreign fighters were trying to hit us with sniper fire and roadside bombs, and we were not prepared for that technically and tactically. We were socially connected, as a team. We were physically fit to fight. But I realized, Adam, at that time that the thing that carried the day and allowed us to accomplish the mission and bring everybody home was our mental game. It was our collected mental toughness. And me as a leader, especially, I knew how to bring those skills in. But like a lot of leaders today, I didn't know how to teach that or train that to my soldiers. So that really started planting this seed that began, how do I fill this gap for more leaders in the military and then throughout society in different arenas? And so, long story short, to fast forward, I went back and I taught at West Point. That same captain was now the colonel, and PhD, he brought me back. And I was exporting that program all throughout the Army because a lot of grads were now realizing the same thing I did. Man, we've got to train our mind like our body and our craft. And there's one place in the Army that knows how to do that. So I was traveling around, working with units, providing mental skills training that I had learned at that time. I started getting my master's degree. It was also an interesting time because in 2009, we had more soldiers killing themselves by suicide than were dying in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. I mean, think about that for a minute. You had more soldiers killing themselves by their own hand than by the hand of the enemy. So our nation's leaders naturally said, we got to do something about this. And so they brought together the existing Army programs and the best and brightest from academia to include the University of Pennsylvania, Chris Peterson, University of Michigan. So I started working with people like Marty Seligman, who we talked about, are giants in psychology, Karen Rivich, and developing the Army's first resilience program. So I'm the Army's first master resilience trainer. I don't know how much of a claim to fame that is, just because when we operationalized resilience training wasn't always effective, but it's a program that's been around for a long time. And then we started this idea of treating soldiers more like tactical athletes. And so I went on, I worked 5 years with 2 elite special forces units. So think Green Berets and jumping out of airplanes, helping hunt bad guys, putting warheads on foreheads. That was my day job, but they also started bringing in all these other health and human performance specialists like nutritionists, strength and conditioning coaches, physical therapists who were civilians from sports. So I started integrating with them and kind of helping fill that gap for Green Berets. And that's when I started, I need that to get reps towards my certification that I have now. But at the time, I started just planting a seed. Maybe I want to do this when I grow up. And at the time, I thought I was a teacher. But when I retired, I realized I'm more of a coach. And so I was lucky, Adam, in that I had a lot of colleagues who were civilians. They're civilian contractors. Every Army installation has a group of people that help provide resilience training, to help provide performance training on the psychological side. So in a lot of our master's and PhD level folks, well, baseball was the first of the 5 American sports to hire them as mental performance coaches. So the first wave of people were my colleagues. One of them happened to be a good friend of mine, Dr. Doug Chadwick, who, like me, Army football player, field artillery officer, was the director of the West Point Center for Advanced Performance, and now is in his 5th year with the Rockies. So he brought me on as an intern because at the time, to help soldiers successfully transition and get employment, they'd allow us to have these internship periods. So I moved my family to Texas in 2020. I started working with the Rockies remotely because everything was shut down. And that just really opened up my eyes to baseball. And baseball was my first love growing up anyways, even though I'm a football guy and that's where I belong now. And so they didn't end up hiring me at the end of the year just because everybody lost money. But I ended up being one of the first mental performance coaches for the Cincinnati Reds, which is the original baseball franchise. I had an amazing experience. But at the same time, what was going on is underneath the surface, I was struggling with my own mental health, Adam. When I retired, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, shocker, very common, traumatic brain injury. I had like adult ADD, which was not a surprise. And so I was really struggling, starting to slow down and unpack these things. And on top of some of all the physical ailments that I'm also dealing with. And just didn't understand, why would I get angry at the time? I'm living my dream. Why do I feel depressed? Why am I waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and having these bad dreams? And so for me, my biggest enemy now was in between my ears was my own pride and ego. And so with the encouragement of my wife and others, I decided to ask for help. And that was the best thing I ever did, just because I started learning about post-traumatic growth, which of course is related to a field that we're near and dear to, positive psychology. And so went through some retreats and some different programs, started seeing a therapist. And through those resources, I started turning my struggle into strength. And so it really was a full circle moment to me. I left baseball to really work on myself and be back integrated with my family, my wife and 4 kids. Started my own business. I decided to rip the Band-Aid off and go all in. That's been the hardest thing I've ever done in a life full of hard things is entrepreneurship, as you know, having my own practice. And I was lucky the Bears hired me as a consultant 2 years ago, going into my 2nd season with them part-time, my 3rd full season with them. And I'm just incredibly blessed. But really who I am and what I'm all about, just to wrap my long story short, is that I'm an old war dog who is all about serving others, man. And I just want to take what I know, my knowledge, skills, and experience, and translate it to helping what I call democratize mental fitness training. So I think that these skills that I teach aren't just for the lucky few and the elite populations. They need to be in the hands of more people earlier in their lifespan and in their careers, especially those arenas where people need it the most, like our kids who are teenagers, like our teachers, our first responders, our healthcare workers, people who don't have access to that. That's to me was what my big vision is. But at the end of the day, I'm a service dog. I want to guide one person at a time to help them become the best version of themselves.
As I'm listening to you, you have so many nuggets, so many hyperlinks that I would love to jump off of. I could talk to you all day. One of the big things that you're dropping is that sports psychology is all psychology. It's something I believe. And that the tenets that lead us to excellent in athletics performance, including getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, as well as finding ways to deal with the seemingly impossible and to perform, and finding ways to solve the puzzle and get out of the quagmire, sometimes in milliseconds, because I'm guessing milliseconds have counted in your life, particularly when you were fighting overseas and you were leading people into battle and situations that were scary and unexpected, as you said, because you were expecting one thing when you went to Iraq, you got another. And you had to have that cognitive flexibility and be able to be nimble and say, all right, we're turning on a dime. We came in with a plan. Yeah, we're doing something different. I was just wondering if you could share one moment. Could be on the athletic field, could be on the battlefield, or even working with someone where you thought to yourself, oh crap, I have no idea how I'm going to get out of this. And you did. I'd love to hear about the situation as well as what strategy got you out of it.
So many, right? But I'll go back to like probably really early one for me. Like back when I was at the prep school, like I told you, there's only 220 people that go there. There's 4,000 people at West Point, around 1,000 graduates. So it's a very small population, usually recruited athletes and soldiers who are coming out of the Army as enlisted soldiers are paired together, right? And you're just doing math and science. It's an SAT prep and it's 10 months long. And so I went in, I didn't even take math. I had this belief that I was not good at math. My parents instilled a lot of confidence in me, but I was a very insecure child. I was bullied. I wouldn't say I was a confident person. By this time, I'm 17 years old and going from Oakdale, California to Fort Mama, New Jersey, right? And I really excelled on the football field. I was doing okay militarily, doing everything I was supposed to. I was doing well in English and humanities. Math was just kicking my butt. It just was absolutely kicking my butt. And I was on academic probation most of the year. And then probably about the fall timeframe, everybody has to reapply to go to West Point. So you got to get your congressional, senatorial, vice presidential nomination again.
Oh my God.
For the 2nd year in a row, which is not easy. I was lucky I got that. But then you have to be academically eligible to do that. Well, I wasn't academically eligible. So I sat there in the back of the room and I just remember crying as my classmates were getting their name called to go get their ticket to go to West Point, right?
Right.
At the very end, I had my final going into the spring semester. For me to even have another chance to get into West Point, I had to get like an 80 on this math final. I studied my ass off, and thank God I reconnected with my instructor at the time who really inspired me to go back and teach actually during this time. He spent hours with me, and was a family man. His name was Major Tate, and he would just come in after hours, meet me and do study hall and just do drill. He was so patient with me. And I had other instructors who just didn't have the patience. I was a lost cause, right? And I felt that, right? But this guy invested in me. He poured into me and I took the test and I got a 78 on the test.
Oh, no.
I got a 78 on this freaking test.
2 points below.
2 points below. So at this point in time, it's like I'm going in front of the chain of command all the way up to the commandant, who's a colonel. And they're like, look, Andy, you're not going to get in. You'll graduate from here. You'll get your points towards your associate degree, but start making other plans. And I did. And it was crushing for me. This was a dream of mine, right? This is my only Division 1A scholarship. And so here I am all the way up until graduation day. I was making plans to go back and walk on to Fresno State. That was my plan. Didn't have a scholarship, no preferred walk on, nothing. I don't even think they had a fullback at the time. So I was going to probably try to play linebacker, right? And so on that very last day, and I still call this a miracle because I don't know exactly what changed. We graduated and then we had a big formal reception ball. We're wearing our Class A uniform and all that stuff. My mom and my grandma came from California. We were celebrating the graduation and they called my name up along with, I think, 2 other of my classmates who needed medical waivers. And we got our packet to go to West Point. And I still get chills when I think about that moment. I call it a miracle because it was literally getting like this. I imagine it would be like a stay of execution or this getting a lottery ticket. Because I think about how important that was in my life trajectory, where I was mentally prepared and I dealt with the disappointment of going home. But then all of a sudden now I'm going to West Point and I'm going to live my dream of playing for Army football, becoming an Army officer, continue the friendships that I developed. The thing that got me through that just was an unwavering belief in myself. And I got that from my parents. And I want to mention that because it comes from my mom. My mom died 2 weeks ago. My mom was really my big source of Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I'm telling that story because my mom was, and parents everywhere, as we know, the science shows, the way that they talk to you becomes your self-talk. You adopt that narrative, that playlist in which they impart on you. And my mom did that. My mom got me to believe that I could do anything I put my mind to it, to really have this resilience and to have this self-talk, talk myself almost into anything. Everybody talks about manifestation or whatever, and I don't necessarily I understand the imagery as a scientist that goes along with that. I don't really believe in manifestation, so to speak. Part of me felt like I willed that into existence. A lot of it's luck, a lot of it's circumstance, but I think at the end of the day, that confidence and unwavering belief in myself is what allowed me to be able to get that opportunity and then capitalize on it.
It sounds like that was a big part of it, but as I listen to your story, and I think about the old African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I'm thinking about Colonel Tate showing up for you almost like an Obi-Wan Kenobi or Mr. Miyagi. You had the recognition that you couldn't do it alone. One of the things that gets lionized in our society, and I think they get it wrong, is that you have to be this individual and you have to be an island and not ask for help. And I think that actually results in suicide. We are social creatures. We need other people. And I love that this story has so many components, including the playlist that your parents gave you, as well as you having the recognition like, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this alone. And probably the best thing I could do, the most grown up, I'm going to say it, manliest thing I could do is ask for help.
Ask for help, which is very hard to do, as you know. And I also want to mention that my classmates were incredibly important because there's this saying at West Point that I learned, and it's a philosophy that really is real. It's called cooperate and graduate. I had so many classmates who were good at math, who took the time to tutor me. As we're going, including my roommate, Luis Mejia Ramon, who was a soldier. His family's from Nicaragua, was an immigrant, helped me out. And guys like Randy Ashby, there's so many others. And then getting help from my classmates, in addition to instructors, and takes an army to raise a soldier, right? Just like it takes a village to raise a child.
Army to raise a soldier. I've never heard that. That's so brilliant.
Yeah, it's really, really true. So yeah, absolutely. Major Tate, my academic.
Major Tate, not Colonel Tate.
It's okay. He became Colonel Tate. And
I got it right.
Yeah, he became Colonel Tate later. So he's Colonel Tate now. And I tracked him down. Thanks to social media, I was able to track him down. We're actually due to talk. He's going to come on my podcast, and I can't wait for that just because I just owe him so much. He was just the right guy at the right time to help me. And I think a lot of time as leaders, we think we're just doing our job, but we can make or break someone's life and career just by investing in them. And he really modeled that for me and really inspired me to like want to go back and be that guy when I taught 10 years later.
That's brilliant. Let's talk about the idea of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that is one of the most brilliant maxims out there because everything we want, really, really want, requires discomfort.
That's right.
And as soon as we accept that fact, that old Buddhist idea of life is hard, and once you accept that fact, life becomes easy.
Right.
And I think this is brilliant. So let's talk about this maxim of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. How did this come about? And I'm sold, by the way, but let's just hear your thoughts on that.
Obviously, is a theme throughout my life, is very personal to me. But where it comes from, not only as a philosophy, but a way of training your mind, body, and spirit, I think is time honored. It's a warrior tradition. And you go back to the great warrior cultures and how they contributed back to their society. This is one of the things that they taught their people. The Spartans in Greece, to the Roman centurions, to samurai warriors, I'm sure that you studied when you were in Japan, to the Templar Knights, to
all the way to the Rocky Balboas.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So in special operation, that is the way, right? That's how we do things, right? And I'm not a Green Beret. I play one on television and I pretend I'm one on the weekends. But as a guy who supports those guys and did a lot of their training, one of the things I learned about them is from the time they were assessed and selected and developed, it takes 3 years to become a Green Beret. It takes 2 years to become a Ranger, probably that amount of time to become a SEAL. Being on the front row of those elite populations, you realize, and I went through that to a certain degree for me, because I had to be selected out of my peers to go work with those guys. But their way of training and doing business is all about extending yourself incrementally in terms of everything you do. That training has to be harder than the actual performance in which you're doing. And,
by the way, I love that idea.
Yeah.
The training has to be harder than the performance.
Yeah. That's right. Training has to be harder than your performance. And you have to lean into things that get you out of your comfort zone, because comfort kills, right? And we know that. And it creates complacency. Just because you've seen something before, you've been back to the same place multiple times in some cases, doesn't necessarily mean that the environment and situation hasn't changed. So it's a way of kind of keeping you on your toes in terms of how do I plan, prepare, perform, and process are the 4 Ps that I've adopted. And so that way of training, I think, is the best way of training. It doesn't always translate to everything in business and in sports or in life, but the way that I look at it is you could pick one modality, one domain. So let's talk about the mental side of myself, right? I want to try things that are new, and I want to do things that are hard, that change my brain patterns. If you do the same workout every single time, your body adapts and you get used to that, right? But every once in a while, you try a different exercise, right? And then all of a sudden you do that exercise, and then like, man, I haven't felt that muscle being worked in a long time. And I think that way mentally is really, really important in terms of how you're engaging things, right? So from my perspective, it's all about pushing yourself to the edge of yourself, peering over the edge to where you almost get scared, and then backing off and then recovering. So it's the work, and then it's the recovery. And then every time you're incrementally extending yourself out and then pushing the edges of yourself, I often get asked, what are some of the misconceptions that your book and that philosophy has imparted on people? And one of them is that suck it up and drive on. Suffering for suffering's sake is not effective, right? It just is not. Humans can endure a lot of pain. We're naturally resilient by birthright, by evolution. Just seeking things to suck for suck's sake is absolutely lunacy. So I don't encourage people to go do things because that's stupid, right?
Needless pain and suffering.
Yeah, needless pain is totally unnecessary. But if you're doing it for a purpose, on purpose, with the idea that it's going to extend me and allow me to be able to grow, that's a good thing, right? And the way that you do that is really through reflection on your experiences and what you filter out, what you don't need, take what you need, and move forward. And every experience that you go through, if you take the time to reflect on it, that's how you ensure that you learn and grow. You don't just automatically learn and grow through your experiences. You learn by reflecting on things, and that improves your self-awareness, which from my perspective is really the foundation of all mental health, resilience, and performance.
You nailed it with the 4 Ps. the process component sounds like it's a really crucial one, because without that, the learning doesn't happen. But just for the sake of retaining, I got prepare, perform, and process. What was the other P?
I think there's 4 phases to every performance, right? If they're big performance, little performance. So planning phase, the preparing phase, the performing phase, and then the processing phase. And it looks like a loop.
I think those.
So, for example, in the NFL, when I'm talking about developing a game day routine on how they're mentally preparing, we break that down in those 4 phases. So each of the days is based on a phase. So obviously you plan it around game day, that's when you're performing, right? That's when you're letting all your skill out. But up to that point, you're then reflecting on your experience. You're filtering that out, leaving behind what you don't need, projecting what you need, and feeding that into the plan. And then I'm game planning to prepare for my opponent on what they're going to do and not do, what our game plan is for that. And then I get into the preparation where I'm actually practicing and implementing the game plan and making adjustments to my technique based on my individual responsibility. So by the time I actually get to the performance, it's like all the work is done. Now there's a quieting of the brain. There's a fully recovered body, or as recovered body as much as possible. Our team is loose and ready to go let all that skill out and really enjoy that entire process.
I think those 4 Ps are spot on. Given everything I've studied, I think you nailed it. I think it's holistic approach from the beginning to the end, and then rinse and repeat. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Maybe the 5th P would be that it's perfect, but
no such thing as a perfect, right?
There's no such thing as perfect, but I think that in terms of a sequence, I can't think of anything better.
It works.
And I agree with you. And I think that the pursuit of perfection is a fool's journey. All right, brother, let's get into this. You work for the Chicago Bears, and you use the 4 Ps on them.
Yeah.
They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
How do you establish rapport with these folks? How do you become an ally to them so that they're like, this is my guy. I am 100% all in.
Rapport and trust is the first and foremost thing, as you know, as a psychology practitioner and provider, right? And so I'm obviously a non-clinical psychology practitioner. I'm a mental performance coach. So I'm like the strength coach for the brain. There's a lot of advantages and disadvantages to that. One of the advantages is my freedom of maneuver, as I call it, to be able to, in my access that I get. I mean, I attend meetings. To me, it's about establishing relationships. And professional athletes, and I think the executives are this way as well, too. They're very weary because they've had enough people who have burned them because everybody wants something from them, right?
100%.
People see dollar signs when they see them, and there's always an angle. And so they tend to be very skeptical, and they keep a small, tight circle around them, right? And so they naturally have these walls that are built up that you've got to be able to then circumnavigate. You got to be able to go over, around, and through them. And so it's not unlike working with an indigenous force in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? They're not like me, right? So how do I make a connection? So the first thing is rapport. And I think how I show up as an authentic human being, to me, like being a great practitioner, being a great leader, it all starts with good dudership, right? You got to pass the sniff test. Is he a good dude or not? Can I trust this guy or not? And it's all about authenticity. And for me, not trying to be someone who I'm not. I'm a loud, outgoing guy, I'm high energy, and that's not for everybody, but I'm going to be me. Right. And so I don't ask anything of them. It's like, I'm not a fan. There's some unwritten rules of the road that come to that as well, too. For me, where I make the biggest amount of headway when it comes to rapport and trust is sitting down and having a meal with people. Because you think about when we sit down and eat, it's when we're most vulnerable. And because we're social creatures, that was when we tend to have bonds. So me just grabbing my tray in the cafeteria and sitting down with a group of guys and picking my spots and getting to know guys and whatnot too. Just be sure I'm saying hello. Where my office is strategically is planted in a high traffic zone. My door is always open. I have glass doors and I go overlook the practice field. It's beautiful. So my office specifically is in a place to where players come by, they say hello, they could pop in. And I call these intentional collisions are really where the secret sauce is, right? Because there are no little things in our world. You can have an interaction that is like making a deposit, right? That's how trust works neurologically. Even just talk to Paul Zak, who's one of the original gangsters when it comes to the neuroscience of trust. And we talked about it's like this bank account, right? And so you've got to give trust and have enough trust in yourself and confidence and authenticity. And then you got to be able to give that. And you make those deposits, and slowly but surely, you build up enough bank account to where people are willing to, whether or not they're stuck or they want to level up, I don't care how they come to me, they're going to come to me. And then once they come to me, my job is to meet them where they are with empathy and with compassion, making sure that I'm doing a really good intake to what they need. And then getting them something that can help them move the needle right away. And so what I do is probably less about therapy, more is about training. So my job is like a strength coach. They come to me and I can't assess them because it's against the collective bargaining agreement, but I can do enough of an intake and assessment to be able to say, hey, I think this is the issue and here's something for you to go work on. So every time people come to me, whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes or 3 hours, they're walking away with things they can go put into action. And when they go put it into action, they could see that it works or doesn't work. That's when we start to be able to move the needle, not only neurologically, but behaviorally, how it affects their performance on the field.
I love that. And you have done it in so many contexts, whether it's with the Chicago Bears or other sports teams,
Yes,
leading
sir.
men into battle, which is the biggest item of trust, as well as raising 4 children.
Yes,
and
sir.
I'm wondering, how
Yeah.
has your military training made you a better father?
I think they really go hand in hand, right? I think all great leaders can be great fathers, but then necessarily are. Like for me, I was very lucky. My dad was a great father. He was there for me while he was running his business. My mom was great. So they modeled showing up for your kids, being empathetic. They really modeled emotional intelligence for me in a lot of ways. And obviously having 4 sisters helps with your EQ as well.
4 sisters.
And yeah, I mean, my emotional literacy, I think they really gave me a head start on my emotional literacy, right? Understanding how people think and feel, being able to read a room, being able to connect, make friends with anybody. Like I learned those at a really young age and they really served me well. But I think you generally have to care for people like on a very personal level. And I think I realized middle towards my career that once my influence started to reduce by orders of magnitude by 4, 5, 6 people, like I realized I'm a small group guy, man, because my superpower is connecting with people, authentically connecting with people, using my emotional intelligence to build those relationships, to build those trusts to where I can help meet them where they're at to get them where they need to go. And I've been doing that for a long time. But when I had limited interactions and limited, my sphere of influence was diminished, I noticed that I wasn't as effective as a leader. I knew pretty early on, at least halfway through my career, that me being a battalion commander, where you have 500 people under your command, like that wasn't my jam. It was not going to leverage my strengths as a leader. I was a small group guy. And in a way, that's why I really excelled in special operations because my teams were like 10 to 12 people that I was ultimately responsible. And that was really easy for me to be able to, even when they were in Germany, I could still build relationships with those people when I saw them and keep those relationships going because it was a very personal, intimate connections. And that's really how I go about my business, just one person at a time.
And it had to be, I'm sure, all of that because the weakest link disturbs the chain. And I'm just wondering if we go back to being a father of 4 children, I'm guessing that some of these tenets of excellent leaderships, whether it's a battalion or professional athletes or children, that there are certain things. Is there one nugget that you'd give a parent to say, hey, this is how you keep 4 children healthy, strong, and connected?
It's like when I wasn't always present. Thank you for flagging that back to answer the question.
Sure, you betcha.
So yeah. I digress. So squirrel. So,
but I come from a tradition where the digressions are often the richest. So your digressions are rich.
First of all, my wife is amazing. So my first investment from day one was my wife. My wife is the rock. My wife, Katie, is a special ed teacher, gave up her very successful career as an architect in Houston to come follow me around every 2 years while I was at war, raising my kids on her own. So it was about supporting her so she could support the kids because I wasn't always there. So let's just get that very, very clear that in the thick of things, when my kids are earlier stage developed, but when I showed up, it was all about the family, right? My family first. And there was even this kind of philosophy that I bucked my whole career, which is the mission first, family always. And I was like, bullshit. My family comes first because the mission is always going to be there. And because I had that philosophy, frankly, I turned down some assignments so I can make sure that I was home. So I was very lucky. I didn't deploy as much as people would think. And I got caught up in that comparison trap at one point in time. That I thank God that I did that. I had breaks between my deployments where I still had hard jobs, but I was able to be home and available for my wife and my family. Had I not done that, I think my wife and my kids would have tapped out because it's a partnership. And by investing in my wife and then showing up for my kids and plugging in with them when I could and being a part of their lives, it's like one of the things we did is like we went on family trips or created experiences for our family that we can remember. So we were extended tourists. So we lived in some amazing places. Our first 6 and 7 years really taught us in Oklahoma, in the middle of nowhere, taught us to really make the most out of where you are and where you live. And I found some hidden gems and like what people would call the armpit of America. But there's some beautiful parts of Oklahoma that I still love. I have a lot of history there. But then we hit all these ace cards, living all over the country and going back to West Point and exploring the Northeast, going to the Pacific Northwest, living in Northwest Florida. We became this extended tourist to where we explored these areas and we were very curious about that. And we tried to assimilate the culture and the way things were, do our best to be able to be adaptive as possible. Teaching our kids that was really important. But then once my kids started doing activities, like, hey, I'm going to parent teacher conferences and I'm prioritizing that. And I'm telling my boss in advance, I'm going to my parent teacher conference. I'm taking the dog to the vet. I am making sure that I'm getting home early on Friday and not just staying late checking email because I want to be able to see my kids before they go to bed because I haven't seen them all week in the middle of the grindest part of my career. So I think prioritizing them is really important, putting them first and being present and being engaged with them. And I'm lucky that the smartphones didn't really come into our life until later on. It's a whole nother story for another day, but allowed me to plug into them in ways that I hadn't. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way, Adam. I mean, there was points in time where I was so interested in so many things that I became overextended. I won't get into that, but I realized that, hey, I need to take some things off my plate, focus my fires on what's important, starting with my family, because I was not going to compromise them. I think the other piece was getting my wife involved in the decision-making. A lot of people think, oh, well, you went to West Point, so you're automatically going to be a lifer. No, I wasn't. I went to West Point to play football. Let's be very clear about that. Becoming an officer was a byproduct of that, for better or for worse. The reason I stayed in the Army is because I had great leaders and I loved being a part of a team and something bigger than myself. And most importantly, because my wife was in. If at any point in time my wife and kids were not in and it was not good for them, we were out. And so it just happened to work out that every step of the way, we had great opportunities. We made really good decisions together. And we were a team in and of ourselves. And I think that's what really translated from me being a leader in the military to also prioritizing my family and having success in both those areas.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that being aligned with your values in both places was absolutely crucial. I'm going to pivot to something that I love that you said. I've studied up on you, bro. One of the things that you contrast between negative thinking, positive thinking, and realistic thinking.
Yes.
I'd like you just to speak about those, because some people believe in negative thinking, some people believe in positive thinking.
Yeah.
I tend to side with you that realistic thinking tends to portend best.
I call the whole thing traffic light thinking, right? So you look at a traffic light, there's green, which means go. That's positive thinking. Red is stop. That's negative thinking. But there's this third type of thinking, which is yellow thinking. Whether we want to admit it or not, the yellow light from a traffic standpoint is warning, right? But in terms of how we respond to it, is we either speed up or we slow down. And it only lasts a little short period of time. The yellow light's like a transitional form of thinking. So we have these thinking patterns that neurologically are happening all the time. And those traffic light patterns can be the animal paths, they could be unimproved roads, they could be highways, superhighways, right? Neurologically, right? And so we know we can form these pathways continuously throughout our lifetime thanks to neuroplasticity. And so I like to debunk things that we think about like positive thinking. Like I know in the 70s and 80s, positive mental attitude was a really popular thing, as you remember, Adam. And but the thing about it is that when things go bad and life happens, Murphy shows up, you deal with challenge, change, and adversity. You're having a fight with your spouse or loved one, you get fired or furloughed. You have a loved one that dies, just something bad happens. Someone cuts you off in traffic and flips you the bird, and it just really gets your goat. Positive mental attitude is not helpful in that situation. And so what's the alternative? Well, negative thinking, we know we have a negativity bias, but I think a lot of people don't understand why we have negative thinking, and it's inherently designed to be our built-in alarm system. So it's part of our birthright is genetically, we survived as a species because of that warning signal to be able to be conservative in different situations that allowed us to survive. Now, it's not congruent with the perceived threats and opportunities that exist today, but it does serve a purpose. But there's this other type of thinking, if you have a dominant negative or big red light in terms of your neurological traffic patterns, and if positive thinking isn't your natural default mode network, I think neutral thinking really plays a big part. And a lot of this comes from the idea of neutral thinking as a term comes from the late, great Trevor Moawad. So I want to give him credit for that too. But it's really backed up on the science of acceptance and commitment training or acceptance commitment therapy, which, as you know, and our audience may not know, is called the third wave of cognitive behavioral therapy, or it's the essence of psychological flexibility. It's by Dr. Stephen Hayes
Amazing
at the
stuff.
University of Nevada in Reno, which I highly recommend you check out. So this is where it comes from. So in essence, what this means is that when bad things happen to me, some sort of challenge, change, and adversity, neutral thinking allows me to transition to more productive thinking, yellow and green thinking, by being able to accept the current reality for what it is, right? And be as objective as possible. And part of that is actually separating ourselves psychologically from our thoughts and our emotions, because we are not our thoughts and our emotions. Sometimes, because we can't see them, we think they are one another the same. Our thoughts are, again, just like this traffic pattern that's going on, and we can observe it and look at it as objectively as possible, knowing that we're highly subjective creatures. If I could separate them and I could take the next best step towards a small victory, that allows me to transition from this negative thinking that can dominate and undermine my performance to a more productive thinking pattern that allows me to use psychological momentum in my favor. And so that traffic light thinking is something that I've been teaching for about 10 years now. It's fundamental towards when I talk about the 4 C's of mental fitness. It's a foundational thing to help build confidence. But I think it's also related to the other aspects of control, commitment, and challenge.
And the 4 C's are what?
So the 4 C's, and this comes from Dr. Peter Clough, who is at the University of Hull right now through my partnership in AQR International. So the 4 C's, mental fitness, or as it were, 4 C's of mental toughness is what it's called, but I adhere to mental fitness, is control. So that deals with life control, emotional control. I also include other mental skills like attention control and imagination control or imagery. Challenge really is about how do you develop a roadmap for success. So that includes your goal orientation, how you get results, includes other psychological concepts like motivation and discipline. The challenge piece is really understanding this is about deliberate discomfort comes in. What's my relationship with stress? How do I deal with work and recovery? How do I do the cost benefit analysis in real time for decision making? And then Carol Dweck's work down the road at Stanford on her work with growth and fixed mindsets, and where you sit on that spectrum. And then the confidence piece comes from fundamentally what you and I align as well too. That comes in with self-efficacy or belief in yourself. It has to do with my self-confidence, which has to do with my competency and my self-talk and my affirmations, my selective perception, how I filter out what happens to me, how do I see things as threat or opportunities. And then beyond self, there's the interpersonal component of building rapport and trust with other people in our relationships or on our teams. So that's control, commitment, challenge, and confidence. So basically, it looks like a pizza pie, but what that ends up becoming is it becomes the dashboard and the roadmap in which I work with my clients and teams. And a lot of people think, okay, well, how do I measure mental fitness or mental toughness? And this is a way to do that. It allows me to create a baseline. And as I do mental training, investigate this every 30 days, every 90 days, basically do a checkpoint, just like you would do a physical fitness program. And then I could do that at the individual level to the corporation level.
Man, I love this idea of having a dashboard and thinking about how am I doing in the realm of control? How am I doing with commitment? How about challenge? How about competence? And how these things are all so interrelated. Listener, Andy is available for keynotes. He's got a really great Rise Up. I know his last name is Riise, but it's spelled R-I-I-S. So he goes with Rise Up, fighting to win the war from within. Just such good stuff. Is there anything I should have asked but haven't yet asked before my final question?
I think we're good, man.
All right, brother.
Yeah.
Here it comes. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Andy, if you had the power to confer upon all humanity one insight or skill that would dramatically improve the lives of the individual, as well as, since we're all connected, the people around them, perhaps even society at large, what would that insight or skill be? And how would that impact the individual as well as society at large?
This is on my mind, so I'm going to share this too. I wish people understood the art and science of motivational interviewing.
My God, I'm with you. Such good stuff, isn't it?
I wish that I knew that as a leader, and I knew that early in my relationship. For those who aren't familiar with it, is how do you ask really good questions that leads to behavior change? But more importantly, how does it help you become more empathetic and compassionate towards other people and actually lean in and listen. And I think that's such a lost skill now. And it's something that I wish that I knew about early on. If I think I could have been even more effective had I known that. I just taught it to a group of soldiers in the New Mexico National Guard. And I'm surprised the amount of people who don't know about it. But knowing that I didn't find out until later, that's not completely surprising. But I think if everybody understood that just a little bit, right? Especially like the ORS component. How do you ask open questions? How do you do affirmations? How do you do reflective listening? And then how do you kind of shift their thinking? That in itself is revolutionary to me. I think it would help solve some of the perceived division that we have that's out there as well, too. That's really disheartening to me. The fact that we're so darn sensitive and we can't have intellectually curious conversations and then we retreat to our own beliefs is very dangerous to me as a society. And if everybody knew that, I think it would shift the needle a little bit. What do you think?
I couldn't agree more. I've had 2 episodes on motivational interviewing, including one with one of the co-creators of it. That would be Stephen Rolnick, who's been on. And all I can say is motivational interviewing allows the person to be sovereign, allows them to be in charge of their lives without having some external person saying, this is how to live. They take a look at their life. They see how they're living. They ask themselves, is it consistent with how I want to live? And they often come to the conclusion, no, it's not. And nothing motivates us more than feeling that dissonance from within and saying, you know what? I got to make a change. Rather than somebody else saying, you've got to make a change. So
that's right.
I feel you on that. Andy, I am beyond stoked that you're on my podcast. I cannot believe how much I've been looking forward to this and how much you've delivered. This has been a blast being with you.
Thanks, Adam.
Man, I cannot wait for more. So I just hope this is only the beginning.
Can't wait to have you on our podcast, Skull Sessions, the art and science of kicking ass between the ears. So be on the lookout, your listeners. We're going to cross-pollinate and then we're going to reverse roles here shortly, man. So I can't wait.
Oh, right back at you, brother. Thanks again.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate you, man.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsay thanking you for listening to SuperPsyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe